ProCognita, Get Agile podcast. Why is Scrum minimal prescriptive? Interview with Angela Johnson. Hi and welcome to Get Agile podcast. My name is Tomasz Wykowski and today with me is Angela Johnson, certified Scrum Trainer from Minneapolis, Minnesota in the north of US. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So we had just conversation about the Scrum and that is super simple and it's like a minimal framework. So what is your take on that, Angela?
When we talk about minimally prescriptive, a lot of people don't understand what that means. If you think about waterfall or project management, that's more prescriptive, or I like to say overly prescriptive. Because if you look at the project management body of knowledge, their guidelines, it's about, I don't know, a couple inches thick. It's pretty long. They tell you a lot of detail. Here's who's supposed to do stuff. Here's how you're supposed to do stuff. Here's a bunch of templates. Tells you kind of exactly what to do, more of a prescription and more of a process. We refer to Scrum as a framework. I like to call them guidelines. And it's not that processes don't exist. They do. It's just that we leave it up to each Scrum team to come up with the process inside the guidelines so that we aren't prescribing something where it may not work. Because the work one Scrum team is doing, they may say, hey, this step in our process doesn't apply to us at all, right? So should we skip it? Should we try to force it in there just to follow the process? Or should we do what works for us? And so from a Scrum perspective, Scrum teams are empowered to come up with works for them inside the guidelines, inside the framework itself.
Which is kind of interesting because many teams are looking for a simple answer for the complex questions, right? And they look into the Scrum guide and don't have an answer, and they're looking for some answer outside the Scrum guide, which is sometimes great if they're looking for the option, but it's not great when they're looking for the prescription, right?
Correct. And I don't know the Polish word for hangover, but do you understand the concept of a hangover? You know,
yeah, we know this pretty well in Poland.
Oh, you do know this pretty well. Okay. So I think of it like a hangover. You know, you wake up after drinking too much and you have this fog and you aren't sure what to do. I think it's kind of a waterfall hangover or a project management hangover. So it's not that people looking for that prescription is a bad thing. It's not good either. They're just like, hey, this is what I was just used to. So what? This is kind of different. So it's almost like they're in this little fog, right? They're in this little hangover moment because they had just been getting all this stuff spoon fed to them. And we're like, no, we're not going to do that now. It's time to wake up. It's time to think for yourself. It's time to use your brain. Oh, I'm not sure how that works. You know, so they struggle a little bit. So I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. It's like, yes, this is different. Yes, this is completely new. So we're going to have to shake that fog off and figure it out.
But it's also super scary for people sometimes when you get out of the, way of working you get used to for the 5, 10, 20 years. And now you guys figure out yourself how you do this in the Scrum way, right?
Right. I love when people are in Scrum training classes who say things like, what do you mean waterfall? What are you talking about project management? You know, they're new to the workforce. Maybe they're just out of university or college. And so they have nothing to unlearn. They have nothing to kind of let go of. And I love people like that. They are a clean slate. We can mold and shape them.
Yeah, one of the difference I have on my trainings, I stopped talking about the waterfall mostly. I just talk about the predictive and adaptive processes. So I basically drop off most of the teams or most of the organization I see, they don't do the waterfall nature basically. So this is one of the observations that over the decade, waterfall is no longer dominant approach, or at least not formally dominant approach, right?
Right. Saying adaptive is probably pretty smart too, because even the term agile, whether you say agile, my teammate says agile. He tries to make people think it's French. I think that word gets so misused also. So you're probably very smart calling it adaptive.
Yeah, so agile is getting overused. Scrum is getting overused. A friend of mine is saying I'm not longer using a word when I'm talking about the transformation in the organization. Just talk about simplification of the organization. This is what we're trying to get, basically, right?
So that's what I call it too. I call it the A word too.
So we remove the processes mostly in Scrum than adding the processes, right? But there's still so many myths that goes around Scrum and Agile. I don't know. Shall we go into that direction?
Yeah, let's do it.
So which is your favorite of the myth around Scrum and Agile?
My least favorite.
Least favorite. Let's go that way. The most common one, or most scary one.
The most common one that I have to spend an enormous amount of time on is that there are no user stories prescribed in Scrum. People come to a training fully expecting that I am going to spend an enormous amount of time teaching them how to write user stories.
Yes.
And it's like, no, we're not going to spend time on that at all. Well, why not? We think it's in Scrum. Show me in the Scrum guide where you find that. And I had one student even bet me. So, I don't know if you guys are big gamblers over there, or, if you wager or bet. And I said, sure, $50, you're on. And he's searching, the electronic PDF, and I'm seeing his face on camera, just get a little worried. And he's like, I know I read it. I know I did. Not in the Scrum guide. I'm like, it's okay. I'll take a credit card. Cash is acceptable too. Maybe you can mail me a check. But it blows their mind. And now they start looking for who to blame, right? Oh, well, my Scrum Master said, or my coach said, or the tool that we're using has user stories in there. Why would that be in there? Well, there's a whole lot of reasons for all those things, but none of which matter, because people need to decide for themselves. And so when I explain, the intent is to talk to each other, it's really advanced. And I know some of the people may not be ready to hear that, but we're going to talk to each other, and then we're going to capture things in plain old words that make sense. What? And it just blows their mind. And then even worse, when they come back, a little while later and go, okay, so wait a minute. I get that the product backlog items are what's on the product backlog. Totally get it. But if we're not going to capture them as user stories, how do we write things down? And then I have to say, you just do. You write it in words that make sense. So you want me to just use words that make sense? Yeah, now you're getting it. And it's just crazy to me that common sense has just been lost with all this over prescription out there in the world of work. It's almost like in that waterfall hangover, people have gotten so used to being spoon-fed templates and told not only what to do, but how to do it, how to think, that they've forgotten just plain old common sense. And it just blows people's minds. It's crazy.
So a few other things that are missing in the Scrum on purpose is like there is nothing about the software. There is nothing about the project management there. I'm not quite sure if the other word is being used anymore in the Scrum Guide 2020.
It's not. That's been removed as well.
Yeah, so one of my recent observation is that people could make their mind if they are teaching about the Agile project management or they are teaching about the Scrum.
Right. There's no project manager in Scrum. I always point out here in America, we love our American football game. We also love baseball. So I always tell people, hey, there's no first base player in the American game of football either. Why are you trying to commingle roles from two completely different ways of doing work? Because I'm very clear that I'm not saying project management is bad. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying it's good either. It's just totally different. And we're trying to change. So we're trying to change. The first thing then people want to do is make it work exactly the way things work now. That doesn't make any sense. Again, it's crazy. It's definition of insanity. So not only does the word Agile not appear in the Scrum Guide, there's no project manager, there's none of the traditional roles. We have new roles, right? We have a new way of doing work that we can talk about, but people get to talk to each other and decide for themselves, not have it spoon-fed to them.
Yeah, so project manager is one thing. The second thing is that project management, which is not there either, right? Not much about the project management. There is, I think, one word about project, but it's more about the sprint being a small project. Anyway, let's go to where we've been a few minutes ago, where we talk about we remove those processes, we make this simpler, we don't give all the answers. So you have a team, and it's more like I'm trying to know your way of working with the organization teams. You have a team, you tell them, you guys need to figure it by yourself. You don't have a template for a user story. You don't need to use the user story, by the way. You don't need to use the burn down chart. And they're like, no, take us from here. So super scary people. And how do you handle this one? So when you have a situation when people are taken from the comfort zone, put into those scrummy stuff, how do you handle them? How do you help them?
There's one of two things that always happens. Some people throw the tantrum, like you said, no, tell me exactly how to do it. And that's a big indicator to me that we don't really have a Scrum problem. We have a people issue to tackle. And then when you don't have a people issue to tackle, it goes the other way. Oh, thank God. Because I think that story format's silly. I don't have to use it. Yay. Oh, I can do it any way that works for us. Yay. So people, if they are motivated individuals, if they are intrinsically professionals who have no problem thinking about how to manage their own work, they like it. They're bought into it because they came up with the solution. But now when you're, micromanaging and telling them, how to do the solution, we're actually taking their empowerment away. So if we say, no, let's go the other way. You need to figure out how to do it. What? No, I'm used to being told. That's going to take some time. We're going to need to find out what's going on. Are they resisting or looking like they're resisting because they really don't understand, and they may need to be shown some examples, or they may need stronger facilitation or stronger coaching to get going? Or is it truly resistance? Because sometimes you have to work through the fact that they may want to get on board. They just don't understand. They just have been so conditioned to work the other way that their unlearning is going to take a little longer.
Yeah, so one of my observations, like the moment we move from the I'm super busy way of working, which is the most common way of working, basically. I sometimes call it a no process. So it's not a waterfall. It's basically everybody's busy and we're trying to deliver anything. And when we move from I'm my role, I'm super busy with doing my task, to we are a Scrum team and we're trying to deliver something, and it's scary because it puts people out of their comfort zone, not from just how to do it, but also I'm taking over the different responsibilities, right? And I don't know how to do it, right?
Right. The other thing that I may look at this a little differently than some people do. However, when somebody tells me I'm busy, I always point out that's just an excuse. It is an excuse, right? We're all busy. I have the same 24 hours in my day that Beyonce has in hers, that Jennifer Lopez has in hers. I'm quite certain we spend our days differently. We choose to spend our time differently. So I find it more honest for people to say, I'm choosing to spend my time on something else right now. Because saying I'm busy, that's crap. We're all busy. So just like you said, now that we're a part of Scrum team, the spotlight's shining. There is no place to hide, because it's like if we're working together in a rugby-like approach on the highest valued item or the highest priority, well, what do you mean you're busy? Doing what? Doing what exactly? So there's no excuses, transparency, spotlights on. And yeah, some people may not like that. That may be uncomfortable at first, but that's how you grow. You're not going to grow, or we're not going to get better without a little discomfort, right?
Yeah, because the feedback can be that you're super busy, but the value of what you do is not too much, right?
Right.
And that is painful, basically. And one of the things is like what I observe is like 2 decades ago, Scrum was just for those few who wanted to rebel the system. Now the Scrum is the way of working, like a standardized way of working, right? And there are consequences to that.
There are. And when I talk to leaders about making these changes, firstly, I want to know, is it Scrum in name only? They just want to say Scrum, Agile, a word, right? Or do they really mean it? Because if they really mean it and we talk about change, I ask them if they are prepared. For what? Are you prepared to lose people? Either way. Because if you're going to make an omelet, we got to break some eggs here. So, if we say, this is the new way of working at this organization, tell me about your plan to get on board. I'm not on board at all. Well, then what's your plan to leave? Because this is the new way of doing work. So if there are too many people who are, I don't want to change, they may leave. And leaders just have to be prepared, to send that message or to set the tone for the way that we're going to work at this organization going forward. Now, they have to be prepared the other way too, because if it's Scrum in name only or Scrum, but, we do Scrum, but not that part, then they may have some people who are totally on board with making the change who get frustrated that it's Scrum in name only or fake Scrum, and kind of getting the mixed message or getting some of their teammates not helping out and so on. And they may leave. So they have to be prepared either way. You know what I mean? They have to be prepared for what's going to happen if this is going to become the new standard.
So talking about the Scrum and Scrum bot and the Scrum, and you mentioned the user story as one of the way people think, one of the items people think is in the Scrum guides. So what are the other things you see often being mentioned?
Oh, people will think that there's a definition of ready. They'll think that there's velocity, story points, all kinds of stuff that just isn't there, that just doesn't exist in the framework.
So what is your recommendation talking about those items? Should people use them because they're different ideas, different approach now in the Agile community?
Yeah, the reason I think that it really hinders agility is we take people's opportunity to experiment, and Scrum is based on experimentation, transparency, inspect, adapt, empiricism. So we take people's opportunity away and let them learn for themselves whether those things are helpful or not. So definition of ready, nothing is more damaging than a definition of ready. You talked about some of those teams of developers kind of being in their old mindset or being scared with this new way of working. No, we don't know how to capture things in plain old words. Well, all of a sudden, because they miss a detailed technical specification being handed to them, they create it and call it definition of ready and weaponize it against the product owner. Here, you didn't come with these exact things in this exact way, so we're not doing it. Well, wait a minute. Why can't you just talk to each other? See, because it happens. And so it's like the answer is just talk and then write down exactly what you agreed to. And it blows people's minds because somebody calling themselves an Agile coach or a Scrum Master prescriptively trotted that little thing out. And we don't know why they did that. Is it that they really don't know any better? Or that they read something on the internet and poof, it must be, the way it is. Same thing with velocity. And the really scary thing about velocity is it in its intent from different Agile frameworks. It was intended to show, did we deliver value? Did we not deliver value? And so when I point out, did their stories, did their PBIs get done during the sprint? Well, no, but we gave them credit for what they started, and then they carry over there is no credit. I'm like, what are they going to do with these credits? Do they get to buy prizes if they save up their credits? I mean, if they didn't get the work done, the velocity is zero. It is zero because the work is done or it is not done. And that blows people's minds. But our leaders want to see it. Now we're getting to the root cause, aren't we? Velocity isn't a performance metric to beat the team with. It's not a performance metric to compare teams or to push them for this hyper productivity nonsense, because they could get real productive delivering crap.
Yeah.
Nobody wants.
And the moment people figure out that you get the credits only for delivering software, I mean, working software, then basically, the discussion changed from how do we increase the velocities to how do we deliver working software, because many teams don't deliver working software every 2 weeks, and they still, their focus is how to increase the velocity. So basically you deliver nothing, how to double that, right?
Right. And what naive Scrum Masters or coaches don't realize is by giving those credits or by rewarding that behavior, you're creating more of it. You're creating more of it. So it's like, wait a minute, just stop for a minute and talk to each other. Start looking at, are we getting done? Are we not getting done? And hey, you have a daily scrum in which to talk to each other about, are we going to get to done? Are we not going to get to done? So that they could adapt before the end of the sprint. But,
okay. So here's a tough question. We're certifying those Scrum Masters. So how do we change that? I mean, we see some behavior. We complain about this behavior. Super fine about complaining on the behavior. But how do we change that? So how do we make sure that those people don't do that, or less people do that at least?
Yeah, certification, and this is going to sound odd, from somebody like you and me who delivers that. It doesn't demonstrate what they know and what they don't know. All that piece of paper says is they had some education, they took a quiz, they now have it. I always liken the certified Scrum Master, for sure, to a driver's license. Here in the US, you don't need any experience. I mean, you need a few hours behind the wheel. You take a quiz, boom, you get your license. Same thing with the CSM. You spend a few hours behind the wheel with an instructor, you take a quiz, boom, here's your license. That certification doesn't say this person has experience. It says they're permitted on the streets. So I try really hard to make sure that they get the basics in my CSM so that they don't start making some of those bad habits when they get to work. And then I do like that the Scrum Alliance, which you and I both serve, have come out with the advanced programs, like the one you and I just did, Advanced Certified Scrum Product Owner, the Advanced Scrum Master. That one shows that they've got some experience under their belt, and a trainer like one of us has vetted them at that midway point, and then again at the CSP. So one of the things I think we could do a better job of is letting the market know that the CSM is the beginning. CSPO, that's the beginning, right? If you want some sort of demonstrated, validated experience that goes along with those things, look at the higher level credentials. But that's why if anybody comes to my CSM, they get the basics over and over and over. How about you? Do you do something similar?
We have the exam for the driving license is more difficult here. We have a manual gears, for example, and it's way more difficult to drive in Europe than in the US. So that's the difference. The thing I'm saying is like the difference between people who've been on the CSM and those who hasn't been on the CSM is like they at least has those few hours of driving lessons, right? So the point is like most of the thing that is happening on the training from my perspective is something you can't learn from the book or super hard to learn from the book, right? So you can prepare yourself to an exam, but it's still just about the book knowledge rather than unlearning what you say, like unlearning that the user story is not Scrum, unlearning that the velocity is not the Scrum, right? And this is basically we need to do.
And trying it. I can't say that when I was a new Scrum Master, I knew any better. I did come from project management and people I was learning from, stories this, story points that, Jira, blah, blah. So for the first couple of years as a new Scrum Master, I'm quite certain I made all the mistakes I see people making right now. And sometimes those first attempts in learning are needed for us to have our light bulb moment and realize, I don't need to do that. But if we can save people from themselves at all, I do like to try.
All right, so let's close with one more question, talking about those Scrum Masters. So if you can recommend something for those guys, like how do they learn, how do they experiment, how do they approach to get better as a Scrum Master, what would you say to them?
They need to step away from the keyboard, or put the pen down. The Scrum Master is not the secretary. It's pretty darn hard to coach if you aren't watching, if you aren't paying attention. And then I would say, stop telling, start asking questions, because a lot of Scrum Masters think that they're somehow the Scrum police, right? Or they're the process police. And nothing could be further from the truth. If they want people to own their own process, to avoid prescription and to come up with it on their own, coaches ask questions. Coaches sometimes ask the tough question. Sometimes they ask the dumb question or the obvious one. So I would tell Scrum Masters to stop telling and start asking, and to put the pen down, step away from the keyboard.
Which is way more difficult in the remote environment, by the way. So
for sure.
But that's a separate conversation, I think. A long one. All right. Thank you very much for this conversation. Enjoy it. And if we have any links, Angela, you want to share, then we can put them under the video.
Nice. Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. To learn more, visit procognita.com/getagile.